Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we're continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and its Ukrainian proxy forces. Now, the crushing of the Kursk salient continues. It would appear that Russian forces, specifically the Russian Air Force, is now utilizing the dreaded Fab 3000 air-launched guided bomb against Ukrainian bridges and infrastructure that would allow for Ukrainian forces to withdraw from the area of the Kursk incursion. We have seen multiple impact points in which the Russians are utilizing these large guided Fab 3000 bombs against the Ukrainian military and its ability to try and move forces out of Kursk. In all probability, the Russians have now snared the rabbit. It is going to be very, very difficult for Ukrainian forces to make its escape in whole of its forces from the Kursk salient or the Kursk pocket. Even within the last 24 hours, the President of the United States was asked about the possible future of U.S. assistance to the Ukrainians, and the President of the United States then stated, even with large-scale U.S. assistance in terms of weapons, money, intelligence, that the probability of victory for the Ukrainians was relatively low. As I've talked about before, the Russian war goal is the complete destruction of the Ukrainian army through a war of attrition and then destruction. And that is what we are continuing to see. Now, the attacks that have occurred within the last 24 hours by Russian forces, we have seen a drastic uptick in both ground assaults and assaults by these large guided glide bombs hitting Ukrainian targets. Now look, we've talked about this before, in which we compared and contrast various capabilities. The Ukrainians don't have this capability. They do not have the ability to launch large numbers of these standoff glide munitions against the opposing force. And the Russians have that ability to do this. The Russians are aware of where the Ukrainian military is positioned in Kursk. And with that information, it is then able to utilize its Air Force to drop these very large glide bombs on Ukrainian targets. And then we have to look at the force construct that has been positioned by the Russians around the Kursk pocket. And we'll just do a quick overview of what exactly the Russians have in this area that they are now using to envelop and then destroy the Ukrainian military. You have the 51st Guards Airborne Regiment of the 106th Airborne Division. That's another element of the 106th. The 56th Air Assault Regiment. The 76th Airborne Division. The 83rd Separate Guards Air Assault Brigade. The 155th Separate Brigade of Marines. Again, another element of the 76th Airborne Division. The 810th Naval Infantry Brigade. and the 177th Separate Regiment of Marines, the 64th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade, the 11th Separate Assault Brigade, the 38th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade, and elements of the 7th Airborne Division. So you have multiple Russian VDV formations or airborne units or divisions and brigades that have been committed to this battle. We also see a number of Russian naval infantry units, specialized naval infantry units. These are the more elite units of the Russian military, meaning both the VDV and these naval infantry troops being supported by regular motorized rifle battalion sets of the regular Russian ground forces. So an immense amount of capability has been positioned against Ukrainian forces. And what's interesting is the Russians are really not needing large-scale tank units. We're not seeing massed units of Russian tanks involved in this operation. Because of where this fight is taking place, and the Russians essentially have surrounded these Ukrainian forces, the Russians are able to degrade and destroy Ukrainian tank formations from afar with drones and heavy artillery. So the need for the Russians to deploy large amounts of tanks is simply something they're not needing right now. This is being done largely by glide munitions, artillery, and these fiber optic attack drones that the Russians are using to great effect against Ukrainian forces. Now it looks like, as we speak, these Ukrainian forces are essentially trapped, and there are some fairly well-known Ukrainian brigades that are trapped in this Kursk pocket as this pocket continues to collapse and Russian forces continue to advance on these Ukrainian forces trapped in this area. Now what's going to happen is eventually these Ukrainian forces are going to be defeated, and the question is what will the Russians then use these forces that were used to crush the Kursk pocket? How will these forces be used in future campaigns against the Ukrainian military? Where will the Russians strike next? Will it be an offensive into or towards Kharkov, Sumy? Will they redeploy towards the Donbass and continue greater and more expansive Donbass offensives? It's difficult to say at this point. But right now, all eyes are on Kursk and what's happening in and around Kursk as the Kursk pocket continues to collapse. And right now it does appear that the Ukrainian military is going to suffer probably one of the most significant defeats of the conflict. Now the question is since this strategy of unwisely moving into Kursk Oblast, what will happen to the Gauleiter of Kiev, Volodymyr Zelensky? Look, I call him that because right now he's not elected. He has had one election, and elections have been cut off. So in humor, Zelensky, the Gauleiter of Kiev. Now, will he survive? Will he survive since the strategy of entering the Russian Federation and quite possibly losing a multitude of Ukrainian combat brigades, some of the best equipped Ukrainian combat brigades in the Ukrainian army are now committed to this fiasco in Kursk? Will the Gauleiter of Kiev survive this disaster? Comment in the comment section. Tell me what you think. As always, thanks for joining us. More to come very soon. Good day.